Derek Carr has been the Raiders quarterback for 9 seasons. For a second-round pick, he has so far amounted a better career than some quarterbacks taken in the first round. However, with his team continuously falling short and his turnovers becoming a problem, especially last Saturday versus the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Raiders opted to bench Carr for backup Jarrett Stidham. Since that time, it's been reported that Derek Carr has stepped away from the team in order to not be a distraction and focus on picking his next team. Carr is still technically under contract for 3 more seasons, but due to a small cap hit, the Raiders can get out of that contract and release him with minimal cap damage. Of course, there is a chance a team trades for that contract, but there's still a possibility that he gets released and hits free agency in this upcoming 2023 offseason. At still just 31 years old and a bevy of teams looking for quarterback upgrades, you'd have to imagine there will be a strong market for Derek Carr. And I can't say I'm surprised with this outcome, as my video from 2 off seasons ago about the Raiders included a lot of concerns that came to fruition, including the terrible drafting by Mike Mayock and John Gruden. Of course, the timing is not ideal considering that less than a year ago, the Raiders gave up massive draft capital to acquire Carr's college teammate and wide receiver Davante Adams. And well, how did Adams react to the news of his quarterback and friend being benched in the middle of the season? Here's what he had to say about that. You know, him being one of my really good friends and the reason why I came here in the first place, I mean, I wouldn't be here right now if he wasn't here. So I think everybody knows how I feel about him. This, of course, is where things get a bit awkward and could cause the Raiders' best player on the roster to become disgruntled and force a trade. Adams, despite being 30 years old, is on pace for his 3rd consecutive season of over 100 grabs, over 1,300 yards, and over 11 touchdowns. Even with a large contract attached to his name, the Raiders will definitely be able to get a great return for Adams if they decide to move on. Even Darren Waller, who's one of the best tight ends in the league, has a very attractive contract for other teams to trade for. But in my honest opinion, the Raiders are doing the right thing here. I've never been a huge Derek Carr guy, but I can acknowledge that he's been a top 10 to 15 quarterback for almost the last decade. The problem is that when you have a quarterback like him, you do have limitations and you do need to put a good team around him. The Raiders were able to do that at some points, especially the 2016 season when Carr was in the MVP conversation before breaking his leg late in the regular season. That Raiders team went 12-4, but with Carr knocked out and Connor Cook playing quarterback versus the Texans, they stood no chance in the playoffs. And since that time, it feels like the Raiders have been treading water and doing the same thing over and over again. They roll out an average to below average roster, have Derek Carr accumulate stats, and just hope it all comes together. And although they made the playoffs last year, it probably gave the organization some false hope on how good they really were. But now, what do? You have Josh McDaniels, who was hired there as a head coach to win, as well as an owner in Mark Davis, who seems to refuse to want to rebuild. It's not even just Carr and Adams that could be elsewhere next season, but it's a contract year for star running back Josh Jacobs, cornerback 1 Rock Ya-Sin, their best middle linebacker Denzel Perryman, and other key contributors are all unrestricted free agents. And as I said in my video 2 years ago, being in the middle and stuck in mediocrity is the worst place you can be as a franchise. I feel bad for the passionate fan base of the Raiders, but you have to hope that the new GM Dave Ziegler, who was hired last offseason, does have a vision and can get this team out of this mess. And being in a division that contains Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert for probably the next decade plus, it doesn't give you exactly the most hope. Just imagine if Russell Wilson worked out too. Now the question remains, where does Derek Carr play next season, because you know he's going somewhere. Assuming the Raiders are actually moving on, the betting favorites right now would be the New York Jets, followed by the Saints and the Buccaneers. I personally would love to see Carr as a Jets because that team gives him the supporting cast he needs to win. The Jets have some really good players under rookie contracts, and Robert Saleh at least seems to have his players bought in. And I think we all can agree that if the Jets had a quarterback like Derek Carr this season, they definitely make the playoffs. And since the NFL is so unpredictable, maybe we see Tom freaking Brady join the Raiders and reunite with Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler, although it seems very unlikely. It just seems like the Raiders have to hit the restart button finally, but I don't know if they're going to do it. They tried to go all in this year and it didn't work out, but luckily for them, they have a lot of good assets that they can trade for some pretty high draft picks. Let me know in the comments where you think Derek Carr will be playing next year and where you think the Raiders are heading as an organization. And before I sign off, remember to pray for Damar Hamlin. At this time, we still don't know what's going to transpire, but we still hope he recovers from what has to be one of the scariest things you'll ever see in sports and in real life. If you enjoyed the video, remember to like and subscribe for more NFL content, and I will talk to you guys next time.